Getting the job done right is the goal of every home builder and homeowner. As a member of our building community, All Access will become a trusted resource for every stage of your building and renovation projects. Plus, we're constantly adding new project guides, videos, articles, expert tips, and more for members only, because there's always more work to be done. Sign up now or give a gift to another builder at finehomebuilding.com/allaccess.
Tries to pull it off, but it's probably not worth the effort.
Can you imagine how long that would take? Oh my gosh.
It'd take an eternity.
It'd take an eternity. Yeah.
Yeah.
And if you go up there with if you go up there with one of those big flamethrower propane tank, you know.
What could possibly go wrong? Welcome to the Fine Homebuilding Podcast, our weekly discussion of building, remodeling, and design topics aimed at anybody who cares deeply about the craft and science of working on houses. This is Senior Editor Patrick McComb. Today I'm joined by producer Jeff Rose.
Hi there.
Senior Editor Mark Peterson. And special
everyone.
Special guest Ian Schwandt, who's a builder and regular FHB contributor.
Hello, everybody.
And it's great to have you guys on the show. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Patrick.
Please email
thanks for inviting me back.
You got no choice, dude.
I'm a little surprised.
Please email your questions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com. You can find previous podcasts and check out the show notes at finehomebuilding.com/podcast. Well, I'm going to get right into this because, Ian, you recently moved into your own home that you built, and you told me ahead of the show that your mortgage appraiser is coming next week, so you are in the throes of finishing the stuff that they're going to notice. Am I right?
Yep, we're at the end. There's going to be some leftover things like my Andy Engel memorial staircase, which I may never finish, in ode to Andy.
We should tell folks the reason you caught of that is because Andy had, as I recall, a Luan plywood balustrade to get his occupancy permit for like at least a decade.
Yep, I have a 3/4 inch maple plywood one that I need to paint.
That's an upgrade.
What else do you think you're going to need to slam together before this person gets there?
I've got 5 pieces of siding still kicking around that I got to put up, and some tongue and groove porch soffit to finish up, and I don't know, maybe 100 feet of baseboard to do yet in the bathrooms.
So when you get this mortgage process finished, like, are you going to really keep working on it, or are you going to take a break? I'm sure it has been every free hour and most of your not free hours dedicated to building this house. What are you going to do?
I'm taking a break.
Yeah.
Except I think we're going to take a break to build a pole barn for me to put a shop in. So,
as a garage and shop, I'm assuming?
Yeah, right now the vehicles sit outside and the shop is in the garage. So, but I do need to finish the garage. It's like partially insulated, and we need to drywall the ceiling and blow in the rest of our cellulose before it gets too cold here. But
will that prevent you from getting you have a CO, right?
Yeah, we got our CO on the 7th of September, and 2 hours later we had half our stuff here.
What is the word of advice, the single biggest piece of advice you would give someone who's planning to build their own house?
I don't know if there's just one, but I would say that it's going to require so much more patience from so many more people than you realize.
Mm-hmm. How busy are you? So I'm in the same process, Ian. Are you having trouble finding? Well, you're connected there. I don't know. I moved to a new place, so I know nobody. Are you still having troubles with getting subcontractors to show up? I mean, are you pounding every nail and laying every shingle, or?
Yeah, I did pretty much everything except for the mechanical stuff, which in the state of Wisconsin, surprisingly, they make you hire a licensed professional to do.
Sure.
So I hired out the electrical, the plumbing, and the excavating and the Mound System. But otherwise, I worked with the concrete guy, poured all the walls with him, did the footings myself. My wife and I actually were out there forming the footings, and that was a little over a year ago that we started that. But in the end, I subbed out the drywall. That was really the big thing that I thought I was going to do, but it got to that point and it was like, man, I could still be drywalling right now if I didn't hire that out. But otherwise, from growing up here, even though I didn't live here for 13 years, I still knew a lot of people. So, just for me, using the people that were around, and that's how I found my drywall guy, was through a friend that I've known since I was like 4 years old. The guys are out there around here.
Yeah. I suppose I'm assuming the Madison, Milwaukee market is on fire like everywhere else.
Yeah. The company I work for doing project development and estimating, we're designing and booking for 2023.
Yeah. And through this house build, you've been working full time as well?
Like half time. So I think I probably worked about 2,000 hours on the house and 1,000 hours for TDS.
That's nice to have that flexibility.
Yeah.
So you're going to go to full time now?
Yeah, I've been full time since we moved in September. So that's what's made this last little bit take that much longer. But we came up with some hacks. Like I built all the cabinets, but instead of me building all the drawers and fittings that we wanted, we just went to IKEA and got $7 cabinet doors and put them on and called that done for now.
Yeah,
sure.
I think done for now is a laudable level of achievement when you're building your own place, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You do have to make some compromises for your own sanity and your budget. And you got slammed with material increases. How did that affect you?
Quite a bit. My target was to do it for about $100 a square foot, and I think in the end we're probably somewhere around 130, which is still pretty good.
That's quite affordable, but a 30% increase is not small.
Yeah, it's not small. It was almost all in the framing lumber, and because we have such tall walls in our great room, the eave is 11 feet, and it goes beyond what the model code in Wisconsin will allow with just off the rack lumber unless you engineer it. And because I'm a nutcase, I didn't want to engineer it. So I went to engineered material and did everything out of LSLs. So those went up a little bit, but by the time we got into 2020, after we'd already gotten it framed, you couldn't get LSLs anymore. So we lucked out.
Well, and it's not just the lumber. Here it's everything. I mean, the copper is 3 times what it was a year and a half ago. It's just a tube of caulking is $9 instead of $4. It's just everything.
Yeah, we got pretty lucky. Our electrician only hit us with about $1,500 in extras for the cost of the wire, but we had removed a few things, so it evened out pretty good. And then our plumber bought everything for our project the day we signed the contract with him, over a year ago. So he just put it in a material shed and had it all ready to go. So we didn't have any of the PVC increases.
I'm sure he was tempted to sell that stuff right out from under you, but So Mark, how's your place coming? Have you made any headway since we last spoke?
Oh, still working on the foundation. I'm getting it filled up to close to, I think this weekend I'll be laying foam down on the floor in the main house and, put the vapor retarder down and then the foam on top of that. And then I'll probably start doing rebar. Hopefully I'll get to the rebar on Sunday maybe.
Putting down the foam under a slab took like way longer than I could ever have imagined. I don't know why that's such a tedious process. Why is it, Ian, such a tedious process?
I don't know. Sarah and I did that together, and we did the PEX pipe on top of it too. So that was even more tedious for us. But
it is, especially when you get to what I'm finding. And I just decided so I've got like these they're called, I think, shoulder blocks basically on the top because it's slab on grade, and it's like 3 little teeny steps that go up the side if you're going to do the whole thing. And I'm just like, this is going to take forever. So I just did the one step and just got some, I'm going to lay the vapor barrier down, did the one step, and then I'm just going to spray, with a froth pack, spray that last bit, because otherwise, like you said, Patrick, it just takes forever.
I don't know why it takes so long. Oh my gosh. What about you, Jeff? How's your deck? Are you done?
The decking is all down. Finished the last of that, and started working on the posts. Just prepping the posts. Haven't started to install them yet, but
Once again, that's something that takes impossibly long, right?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's just sanding the 4x4s before I stain them and things like that. So
Did you have to add blocking to where the posts are going, or are the posts already there? You're just cleaning them up?
no, the posts have not been installed at all, but the blocking is there. The the threaded rod is going through to the adjacent joists, and all the tension ties are there. But
So you're doing this legit.
yeah,
It's probably a good idea given how high your deck is.
yeah, and working with all you guys, I can't really fake it.
Oh no, we wouldn't let you do that. I've been working on my staircase, and I'm going to keep it brief, but I wanted to tell you guys about something paint-wise that I found that's absolutely fantastic. So this is a waterborne interior alkyd paint. Have you used this, Ian? You're nodding your head.
Yeah,
Fantastic.
I've used that on pieces of furniture, actually.
So this is Benjamin Moore Advance, and I honestly had no idea what I was buying when the lady at the paint store mixed it up a gallon of white trim paint for me, but oh my gosh, the self-leveling characteristics and the open time of this stuff is absolutely fantastic. It's like oil paint, except it cleans up with water. It is wonderful.
Really?
Yeah, it is so good.
I've always struggled with any kind of acrylic trim paint. It just seems like it dries I just can't. The conditions have to be perfect without getting brush strokes, unless you're spraying, of course. But still, if you're trying to brush it on, I've never had luck. It's always brush strokes.
I would say this is a 10 out of 10 with regard to paint. So, once again, folks, Advance from Benjamin Moore, waterborne interior alkyd, and it comes in a 5 or 6 different sheens. So, boy, it's
and you're brushing
fantastic.
it, and you're brushing it on or spraying?
I'm brushing it. Yeah. I thought about buying a sprayer, but honestly, this time of year, I have nowhere to spray. I can't go outside, right? Leaves are falling, the propellers or helicopters from the maple trees, all that stuff. It's a mess.
I did a lot of tables for a bookstore in New York, and I did all the tops of them with that Advance, I think in the pearl sheen that had just a little bit of to it. I think it's maybe between satin and semi-gloss. But yeah, that stuff was really great to use.
I don't even remember what it costs. Like, don't worry about it. Just buy it. That's what I'm going to say. So we once again heard from some of our fantastic listeners. Hello, FHB Podcast. In episode 396, there was a question around greywater systems and what the water can be used for. The discussion was really good, but why are you limiting the options to greywater? In the swampy lands of the Texas Gulf Coast, they're required to treat and reuse their black water for irrigation due to the fact that a traditional septic tank and leach field would pollute the surrounding water table. And I'll put a link on the podcast page to this web page that describes how they do this. There's an absolutely amazing book called Growing Clean Water, currently out of print, that was written by a PhD that did studies for NASA on how to treat water and air using plants for potential use in habitats off Earth. The book is a fascinating read and goes over how to treat your black water using no chemicals to the point where it is safe to discharge into a lawn or flower bed. The book also covers industrial scale water treatment using plants, but that is of less interest to Fine Homebuilding. For those people that are stuck inside all day and want to breathe better air, he also has a book, How to Grow Fresh Air, that covers the best houseplants to grow and purify the air naturally. I hope this sparks yet another lively discussion. Well, we heard from a lot of folks on the greywater question. It's something that is actually getting some traction in Southern California and parts of Texas because it's so dry. I'm sure you guys were tempted to recycle your gray water right where you live. It's not enough rain in the Midwest.
He sent a link that I just took a quick look at from the I think it was a Texas A&M, like a white page, and greywater, going from greywater to blackwater, there's a lot involved with the blackwater systems. They're purifying their effluent like you would at a waste treatment plant, right? It's not just putting it on the ground. And there's tons of because this isn't just if going on your yard, if you're spraying your grass, it's going on your neighbor's, eventually it's going to run. So there's a lot of testing and I'm not saying don't do it, but you really got to be prepared for what you're getting. As a matter of fact, there was a list of, and I just copied and pasted this, there's a list of things that you need to know or things you should do before you even attempt this on your own. and one of them was be adequately vaccinated against diphtheria, hepatitis B, tetanus, hepatitis A, paratyphoid, polio, and typhoid fever. And I'm thinking, wow. If I was like on the fence just reading that, I'm like, I think either I'm not going to do it myself or get a professional.
That was one thing that it talked about in the end of that white paper was how to go about hiring that professional, which
Yes.
I feel like that should have been at the top of the white paper.
Yeah. And it was, this funny thing, and not funny, but it was, there's just a lot to it. I mean, like just when you go on vacation, there's different steps. I mean, you really have to be on top of this thing.
It's got to be stupidly expensive too, right? I mean, nobody would do this unless you absolutely had to, unless there was no other way to treat your septic.
Yep. And water, if water's that much of a shortage, I could see doing it though.
So Ian, tell us about your mound system. How is that a standard fare in your area because of the soil conditions? I'm assuming it's clay.
Yeah, it is pretty standard fare. There's a couple of people that have built around this area that lucked out and had a little bit of a sand deposit on their lot and were able to do a regular septic. But the regular engineered mound system, that's pretty standard here. And our excavation contractor did that right along with digging the hole. So he snuck our mound in last year before weight limits went on the road. So that was really great. And we didn't
we should tell folks
in
in colder places in the springtime, they often prevent big trucks from riding on the dirt roads because it just destroys them in the mud.
Yeah.
Right?
On any road, any county road or city street.
So, paved roads too?
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's signs on, the road saying limit X amount of tons per axle or whatever. So yeah, usually they get off around beginning of April. They go from, December to April. So it's hard to, it's probably just closer into the spring when it's starting to thaw. I think that's the problem.
Yeah. There are some weight limits in that late fall, early winter around here where they don't want big equipment on the roads.
Ian,
sorry, Patrick, how many feet was your leach field in that mound system? Do you know? Do you remember?
The mound that's built?
Yeah.
I feel like it's like 30 something feet or maybe 40 feet. But I did, in response to another question that you guys had gotten several months ago on septic systems, I did send Brian and Patrick something about the specs of my system and what the difference between like a 2-bedroom mound and a 3-bedroom mound was. And I think it just added like 10 or 15 feet on to the length of it for every bedroom that you were putting in, but the tank size for me stayed the same. So
did you have a 1,200 or 1,500?
1,200 or 1,500
for the tank size.
Gallon.
Yeah, I think it's a 1,200, and it's a concrete tank in the ground, and then it pumps up into the mound, but we're gravity fed to the tank.
What did the system cost, Ian? Do you remember?
The mound system alone, I think, was about $17,000.
Yeah. So when people write in that they got a few $1,000 septic system somewhere, I'm always blown away because.
Well, it's a lot cheaper. They don't do mounds in Kentucky, and it's. I think I paid. So I have a 1250 tank, and the leach fields like 400 feet, between 300 and 400 feet of leach fields, and it was under. I think it was right around 7,000. And I helped a little bit by spreading the rock, but yeah, it's considered.
So yours is pipe and stone gravity leach field. Is that? Yeah.
Yep, that's it.
Mm-hmm. How's that work with the clay? You have clay too.
I think they just add on. I think they just add on for the soil. If you need 200 feet of leach field in good soil, they just add on depending on the soil. They did come out and test the soil and this and that. So I hope that's.
You want that to work. That's really one thing that has to work.
Yes, it does.
So this comes from Jason, who's a territory manager for Parksite, which is a building material supplier. I'm pretty far behind in my episodes. Are you guys still looking for this? So he sent us a link to model train smoke fluid liquid, which I think he was imagining we would be using to find air leaks. Did you guys have model railroads that the locomotives smoked? That is so impossibly cool.
I had that. It was awesome. And that is probably dating me, I think, quite a bit.
What I think is the problem is those chemicals are toxic, right? Isn't it some horrible it's chemical?
Well, they did stink up the room for days after you used it, so.
There's a generation of boys that have like these tumors developing and no one knows why. This comes from Dack. Hello, FHB podcast. Whoa, I think I need to take back all the nice things I said about Mark. Popcorn ceilings? Dear God, no. Thanks to Patrick for pushing back on that. Sorry about my fellow former Minnesotan. He should stick to the non-finishing side of the building biz. Also votes for halogen bulbs and recessed cans. I have them in my 7-foot basement ceiling, and they're awesome at any brightness level. You'll have to pry incandescent bulbs from my cold, dead hands.
All right. In my defense, I was somewhat tongue-in-cheek on the popcorn
I know
ceiling.
it was.
I just think, and I've never, the houses that we've built, we've always done knockdown, and I'm probably going to do a knockdown here. I just think it's funny that people are there's people who just hate it.
Oh, it's a very visceral reaction.
It is. It's funny. So yeah, I might have been poking a couple people at that one. But I do have a question for you guys on that. So I'm probably going to do a knockdown. Is that typically what you do, Ian, in your house, is a knockdown, or are you doing flat?
I did totally flat in mine.
Did you?
I can hear the echo.
Yeah, exactly. So could Jeff. It's weird. I talked to my drywall guy about it, and he kind of laid it out that certain regions of this state do knockdown or in and around Milwaukee, and then in and around Madison, it's a lot of sand texture and orange peel. And then out here in the sticks where I am, it's typically knockdown. But yeah, it's
so weird to me how that's regional, even like
it is
hyper regional, right?
Yeah. So how about wall? I got a question for you guys. I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go flat on the walls, because orange peel just seems like it's so hard to fix if there's a hole in it. I know I would not make that look good. But what about corners? Did you do round corners, or did you square? It looks like you did square in the background.
Yeah, everything is square corners. So they did. Go ahead.
Go ahead. What do you think about round corners?
I think it was really cool for about 3 years, and now it looks like it came from that decade when that was cool for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably a pain because you have to cut back the drywall to make all that stuff work.
Right. Yeah, a lot of the homes that I trimmed during the production home boom of like 2002 all had the round corners, then had the little square block on the bottom for the base to go around. So to me, the round corners would always date me back to like second year apprenticeship.
Does that make you younger?
Oh yeah, it would make me a lot younger.
That's I don't know. I haven't seen that lately. It seemed like that was popular for a very brief period.
And Patrick, do they do orange peel walls texture in your neck of the woods?
Never. Under any circumstances, for any reason, never.
It's popular here, and my in-laws all come from Iowa, and every single one of their houses had orange peel texture.
So I was on the Cape just yesterday photographing an overhang detail that was pretty cool. But the reason I bring it up is they're all veneer plaster, like the Boston metro area. And that's another thing I found mind-blowing. Apparently, you can get plaster work done cheaper than you can drywalling, which I found amazing. Because the finish is absolutely gorgeous when it's done.
Sure.
You thinking of doing that, Mark? You're going to spread your own plaster?
No, I'm not.
The one thing that our drywall guy told me when we were doing our flat was he did it to pretty much a level 4 finish. And then he had us spray I think it's a
primer
PVA,
surfacer?
Yeah, PVA high build primer on for the first primer coat. And then we did a regular primer coat over that. And then 2 coats of we used Benmore interior paint for that.
What does that first coat do? I guess I've never heard of that. What does that first coat do for you?
So it's a new drywall primer. So it's made to fill all the little pores on the paper and level them out so that you're starting your base layer of primer with a totally flat. paint
Makes
surface.
the porosity consistent over the entire panel, so you don't have
Right.
paper and compound. It makes it,
Yep.
Sure.
so it takes the color more uniform.
Okay, that makes sense.
And actually, I found that primer was really cheap. So
It's
why
really
do-
cheap.
But you do want to go over it with another coat of primer after that.
yeah.
Can you just paint right over it, or
I
it's
did in
sure
my
you
barn, but I
could.
painted pure white, so I think that's more forgiving than something that had a color in it, especially a deep color. It would, I think, take the finish differently.
do you guys tint your primer when you prime?
If it's a really dark color, I will. It's
Yeah.
super helpful. Yeah.
It sure is. I usually print, just a shade lighter than what the paint is, so you can see when you're, see what you're not missing spots.
Oh my God! So, folks, bear with me. This is a long email from Tom. Tom's building a barndominium, and I finally decided to add barndominium to my Microsoft Word
Lexicon?
dictionary because I was sick of it correcting it. It's become a word in a few years.
I'm living in one, so I know all about it.
I think you need like a bumper sticker, barndominium life.
I might just stay here and sell the house when I'm done with it.
Hello, Fine Homebuilding crew. Thanks for more discussion on my crawl space in podcast 376. I am indeed blowing air from the conditioned space above, served by mini splits, into the crawl space and recovering that air back to the conditioned space through the floor registers of the forced air heating system I removed. That way I didn't have to retrim all the register holes. Now my next question. My son and I are putting up a 5,000 square foot engineered metal building with just under 1,200 square foot of living space using a stick-built construction inside. The rest will be a garage/hobby space. It's in Southeast Michigan, Climate Zone 5. The structure will be a year-round residence and 100% off the grid, and solar powered, so energy efficiency is critical. The floor will be poured concrete, frost-protected, shallow foundation design with thermal breaks between the conditioned and unconditioned spaces. The whole floor can be selectively heated by a wood-burning outside hydronic boiler using freeze-proof working fluid with PEX loops in the floor. With 20 acres of hardwood trees on the land, it should be self-sustaining. This living space will be primarily conditioned by a 3-zone mini-split system. Yes, I did the manual J calculation because of your constant nagging and ordered a much smaller system than was originally planned. The burden now is to hit the air seal and insulation numbers I promised in the manual J. At the expense of furthering your fine air sealing podcast reputation, my question is about detailing window and door water vapor and air barriers with the raised rib metal siding, outer skin, and no other exterior sheathing. The outside wall assembly in the living area will have the metal raised rib skin, screws to 8-inch horizontal, metal Z-shaped girts with 3-inch flanges, and roughly 4-inch horizontal centers. Inside the girts will be 2x4 studs with a 1/2-inch gap between the wood and girts. This means the total wall depth will be 12 inches. The 2 large support beams in the living space will also be boxed in with 2x4s. There will be 2 inches of closed-cell spray foam applied to all metal surfaces, including the girts and support beams. The cavity between the spray foam and drywall on the inside of the stud wall will be filled with dense pack fiberglass. Okay, questions. First, is it worth to put a WRB between the metal skin and the girts? The pro argument I know is that it makes fixing a skin detail much easier than if I spray the foam directly to the metal. The con is that the disconnect between the foam and metal skin may collect condensation and eventually lead to rusting metal. Also, the decoupling of the skin and foam may lead to more noise of the skin flexing in the wind. Your thoughts? Second, and more important, how do I seal the windows and doors installed in the exterior metal skin? Tape, caulk, foam, all of the above? What seals to what? I've looked a lot and not found any discussion of how to air seal to the visible exterior metal skin that is both water and an air barrier. We plan to install boxes to connect the inner and outer walls at the windows and doors to provide mounting surfaces for the windows just below the skin. There are only 6 windows and 2 doors in the outside walls. I don't want the wood boxes exposed to weather, so I thought they would terminate behind the metal siding. We plan to use metal J-channel made for raised rib siding and foam seals formed to match the ribs to trim out the openings and handle the bulk water. but how do I detail them for air and vapor intrusion has not been obvious. There must be a solid way to do this. Others have certainly encountered this issue, but I haven't found much published about it. Help. Okay, if y'all are still with me, we're almost done. Best regards. I love listening to your podcast whenever I have the time. I started at number 1 and up to about number 320, plus the later ones when you have answered my previous questions. For Patrick, in addition to the serial house project, I'm also restoring a 1951 Chevy 1-ton panel truck and a 1962 Corvette that I've owned for 45 years. We need to get this building done since a hoist will go into support of that part of my psyche. Wow, that sounds like fun. Okay. 62 is a good year, Tom. I hope it has the fuel injection. Anyway, so, oh my God, this is impossible. What are we doing here? So this guy's building a barndominium living space inside his pole building. And Ian, we talked a little bit about this last night. What are your thoughts? You're overwhelmed. You're like stunned. You can't even talk.
Yeah, I first of all, I think Tom has got to be like somebody that doesn't sleep to do all of that stuff. But I would treat the metal frame and skin of that building like a rain screen, and stick build an air sealed box inside of it, totally independent of that, and then insulate those walls and not try and incorporate the metal into
so you're gonna put on this metal siding over a plywood sheathing layer and strapping, or how are you gonna handle the rain screen detail?
No, I would totally build the metal building first and then build the box inside the metal building. So like if you use zip or even at that point CDX with the joints taped, you would just stand your wall up against the metal, the
and
existing
then how
metal
do you
frame.
detail the openings as like he asked?
I think that you'd do the same thing that like I did with my 12-inch double wall, and you just build a plywood buck out of, zip going out into your cut opening in the metal and make it totally independent.
There's a great article on GBA, and we might have actually run it in Fine Homebuilding too, describing Dudley boxes, and they're named for the carpenter who invented this like kind of plywood buck meant to make it easier to install. In his case, originally it was like new windows and wonky openings, but it's great for double stud walls and probably this too, right?
Yeah, I would think so. And it's the same thing that I've done in masonry buildings to install windows. You just start with an oversized space. But even from like the first thing I thought of was going back to the Passive House envelope training that I did at Passive House, New York, where they really went through the different, I'm going to mess the language up, but just the thermal coefficient that metal has versus wood, and just how much more difficult that is to properly insulate so it's not sucking heat out. I don't think it would be that big of a deal if he didn't want to be off the grid.
That's huge, right?
He wants to be off the grid. I think he's got to make that living space independent.
Mark, I want to ask you about your thoughts of barndominiums.
Back to the specifics of his exterior, I was just wondering. So everything's kind of 4 foot on center on the steel buildings. I wonder if you could, scab a little more, cut that in half with a little more framing, and then put an inch rigid foam on the whole exterior before you put. And you'd have to talk to the manufacturers of the steel and all that, so that if you sheathed it basically in 1 inch foam, and boxed out your window areas, and then treated that foam like it was sheathing, and flash it like that, like your typical flashing, and then put the steel on, because he was going to spray foam anyway, right on the skin of the metal. And he mentioned putting a weather resistant barrier and then foaming to that. That would make me nervous, because if that thing tore, I don't know, it just seems it's just hanging onto paper. And I know it can span, but yeah, if it was me, I would consider doing the whole exterior in like an inch of, and then if he could still spray to the foam inside of that, and that I would feel comfortable with spraying to the 1 inch foam, and then it's kind of like, the one caveat with that is that steel siding, I guess, is it does, around J channels and up in the soffit areas. If you get driving rain, it comes in. It comes in. It's every single time.
Because it doesn't matter in the normal use of a steel building. It's a utility building, right? It gets
if
wet,
you
it
get a foam
dries out.
tractor in there, it gets wet, it dries out, it gets wet. It can do that hundreds of times. So you may want to consider on the outside of that foam putting a WRB and really tightening it up more. So that's one way I would consider. One thing he didn't mention, I certainly hope make sure you're putting a barrier on that slab on grade too, because you don't, that makes a big difference. Some type of thermal break.
Poly under it, right?
No, yeah, it's just some type of thermal break between the exterior cold Michigan ground and then that slab.
Right.
You mentioned that it would be frost protected, the shallow frost protected design. So I would assume he's going out into the surrounding ground space with some buried foam.
Or at least have, foam on the edge. That at a minimum, right? It depends on how cold it is. Michigan's cold, so. You mentioned to me one time, Mark, that pole buildings and a metal frame building, I think, is sufficiently similar. That with all the trouble you go into to doing the infill, it's oftentimes you think it's easier to just build a stick frame building, right? Yep. Especially if it's already on a thickened edge slab, as a frost protected shallow foundation might be, right?
And what I've noticed too in this building, I've had metal roofs on 2 of my buildings. I put metal roofs, but I put sheathing down first. And then people say, "Oh, it's loud. It pops. It makes loud noises." And I had none of that. I mean, it was a little bit louder in the non-insulated areas of the steel roof. It was louder when it rained, but there was no popping or cracking. This building here, man, this thing, it's like an orchestra when the sun heats up about 10 o'clock, man. It's like somebody's playing the drums on my roof. It's crazy.
So this is put on purlins without the sheathing layer, right? Yeah.
And I talked to one of the contractors who's going to do my house, because I'm going to have a couple sections of steel, and they did not want to put OSB down. They did not want to put the steel, even if I put the OSB down, they did not want to put it over the OSB, and I guess I wasn't sure exactly why. But my other 2 buildings, one of them lasted for 20 years. I never had one teeny problem with it, so I don't. Have you ever heard anything about not putting steel down over OSB?
No, I've seen that done on many different pole barn applications.
And modern construction too, sometimes modern homes use these, steel panels. Mm-hmm. Well, Tom, I hope you enjoy your barndominium. Keep us posted on how it goes. I look forward to hearing about that process and your car restorations. That sounds fun too. This comes from Curt in South Central PA. Greetings. I like the Zip system, Zip R specifically, but I also own a sawmill. When I remodel and add on to my house, is it worth using my own lumber for sheathing and a roof deck? What would I use for the WRB and air sealing, or is the Zip product far superior to anything else would it be better to spend money on that than to use my almost free lumber with other air sealing and water management methods and products? Oh, this is a great question. Does it make sense to use your own lumber? Who goes first?
I would.
You would use your own?
Yeah, the one thing you have to double check, because when lumber prices are going through the roof, I actually thought, you know what, maybe because I've got tons of trees and there's some are down here, so I was even thinking about doing some of my own lumber with the sawmill.
Were you going to buy a wood miser? I bet you can't get one now. I bet everyone has bought a wood miser. Yeah,
I'm luckily, the only thing better than owning a sawmill is having a neighbor that owns a sawmill.
I think that's way better.
Yeah. So, and I did a little math. I mean, my neighbor had, I think it was 10 or a dozen pretty good-sized logs, maybe 12, 14-foot logs dropped off for, these guys who cut trees down for a living. A lot of them just don't want to mess around with that. They'll drop them off cheap. So I think
because they have to pay to get rid of them. Yeah.
Yeah. So he spent like $300 to have them delivered, and at just a quick math, I think he got about $2,000 worth of one-buy material out of that. But there again, it takes time. And energy, and it's not easy work. And the other thing you got to think about, when I was researching this a little bit, you can't just cut yourself a 2x4 and you build a house out of it. The inspectors, an engineer has to inspect it.
I've learned recently, though, that some states, and it definitely varies by state, have rules about using native lumber because they want to encourage this practice. So it's easier in some places than others.
Yeah, and so but for sheathing, maybe but for sheathing, I'm not sure if for framing members, you do have to get it inspected, but if you're just sheathing your house with it, I can't imagine why that would matter that much.
What do you think, Ian? You did some math too. I'm curious if you guys came up with the same number.
Yeah, no, I took it from the, is it worth your time to do it? So I looked up and found zip for $36 a sheet for the non-zip R version. So I've got
That's come back down a lot.
Yeah. And that was, I think I searched at a Home Depot in South Central Pennsylvania. So that's $1.13 a square foot. And then like a peel and stick WRB, which is what I would use over that skip sheathing and what I've used before in timber frames, is 75 cents a square foot. So that's a pretty big cost that you have to swallow up over your sawmill skip sheathing. So then I came up with that you would need to be able to process your own lumber for 38 cents a square foot to break even, to make it cost the same as the zip. So I had, if you value your time at $50 an hour, you'd have to process 130 feet or 130 square feet of lumber an hour to break even.
Do you think that's possible? What do you know about sawing logs?
I checked on wood misers, and it's well within the range of most of them. You could do it easily. I would be more concerned about it drying after you put it on and after putting the WRB on it.
That could look ugly, right? Like if this board shrink and you got that WRB stuck on there, I don't know what would happen.
Not just that, but then your siding that you're putting over it, or your shingles, any of that. I'm not even sure that asphalt manufacturers would let you go over that.
What I find interesting is like we used to build this way, and now all the rules kind of prevent you from doing it easily, right? I don't know. So the thing about sawing your own lumber is you not only need like the sawmill, like to the tune of $10,000 to $30,000, $40,000, right? But you also need a way to handle the logs if you're going to saw anything of any size, right? And so that means you need a tractor, and that also means you need like a grapple or forks on it or something. And then you, like Ian said, you need a way to dry it for, at least a year, right? So I don't know.
I think if it's the thing that you love doing and you love being at that wood miser cutting wood, then go for it. But it's not a money saver, and it's definitely not a time saver. So it's really in how you value your money and time.
Jeff, what do you think? It seems like this would be something you would like to do.
I think he should make the wood with his sawmill, sell it, and use zip.
That's the best idea so far. Once again, Curt, let us know what you do. And I'd love to know, like, if anyone else has done this, please tell us what your thoughts and if you would what you would tell Curt about it.
I think you should build a barndominium with it.
Seriously,
It'd be much
an
more
outbuilding
fitting for a barndominium.
Yeah.
Maybe an outbuilding makes a lot more sense, right? Even if it's like the attached garage, that would look great and be cool. So this is from Mike. I'm in the process of stripping and re-roofing my house. There are 2 layers of peel and stick ice barrier membrane stuck to the roof sheathing, and neither will budge. Question 1, since there are already 2 layers and the membranes are supposed to be self-sealing, do I need to install a new sheet of ice and water barrier to the existing 2 layers? Or will the existing 2 layers be enough to prevent water leaks if there's ever an ice dam? Question 2, if you think I need to apply a new layer, can I apply it right over the old layers, or do I have to remove those to get to the roof sheathing? Also, do I have to remove them? And also, if I do have to remove them, do you have any tips for removing the old peel and stick? Well, I'm hoping you guys have tips, because anytime I've tried to even reposition that stuff, I found it to be impossible.
I'm with you. I wish there was and the thing is, like everything, a lot of things we do, nobody cares you might think about the next guy down the line, but in the end, nobody's worries about that, And so I'm hoping that you have something, Ian, because I've never been able to get that stuff off without just tearing up, delaminating the plywood, and it's just
horrible.
Awful.
Yeah, or it tears off in like 2-inch pieces, right? It's like
Yep.
So when Patrick sent me this question, I was actually at our office at TDS, and our production manager, Sean Size, used to work in the roofing industry before he was our production manager. And he has a penchant for, ratcheting up the attention to detail to 11. So I thought he's the perfect guy for this question. So I'll give you his response. And he said with the ice and water being self-healing around nail penetrations, once those nails are removed, he thinks the ship has sailed. That hole's probably there for good. And then he said the removal of the old layers is next to impossible. You can try it with a heat gun warming a corner while a second person tries to pull it off, but it's probably not worth the effort.
Can you imagine how long that would take? Oh my gosh.
Yeah. It'd take an eternity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if you go up there with one of those big flamethrower propane tank,
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, what could possibly go wrong?
You get the ice and water off, but you burn the house down in the process.
That's how you get it off. You set it on fire.
Yeah.
But so he felt like what you should do before you go over it again would be to just take a hammer and knock on the sheathing that you're going to be covering. Make sure there's no soft spots or damaged spots, and then just make sure it's really clean and go right over it again. You're not adding that much weight. You're not adding that much thickness to go.
And you're not hampering the drying potential because that's already ruined, right? That's
right.
And things don't dry through the asphalt shingles anyway. That's something we used to think happened, but it turns out it doesn't work.
No.
So.
No, but he ended his comment with, we're to the point now where we started doing this 30 or 40 years ago, and we're going to be hitting,
right,
the third roof on some of those houses.
Yeah,
so
what happens then?
Yeah, exactly.
There'll be a good market for roof decking replacement.
Yeah.
Or there's going to be some supremely toxic chemical that you're going to need to dissolve the adhesive, like MEK or something. You'll be up there with rag mops mopping this stuff.
Yeah. And like I said, if we don't care what the next person's doing, so even if somebody came out with one that somehow magically you could take off and work just as well, if it was 50 cents more a square foot, nobody's going to buy it.
If it was 5 cents more a square foot, no one's going to buy it.
Right.
I'm gonna push myself off the cliff here, but the whole logic of ice and water barrier, it kind of confuses me. I mean, it is a code requirement, and it probably makes some sense, but if you have ice dams, that seems like a bigger problem, and you're not fixing it with the ice and water barrier.
I've always the same thing, because all right. So if you don't have any ice dams or no gutters in the house, I don't think it's doing anything for you. If you do have ice dams, sure, it'll prevent that water from sneaking back up under the shingle and into the roof decking. But
maybe.
But even then, if you have terrible ice dams and you have your insulation or you have no air sealant between your house and your attic. I don't know how many, I did this for a living for a little while, went around, tried to find water problems. Well, when you have ice dams, a lot of times, if you go up in those attics, there's an inch of water stuck to the bottom of that roof decking that's rotting out. It's until it melts and then starts rotting. I mean, what you see on the outside is only half of the problem, maybe not even half of the problem. So that ice and water is not going to. I mean, because you'll have sheets of ice all the way up, covering the whole deck from the soffit to the peak. It's just, it's a problem, and a lot of people don't realize what's going on up there. Because let's face it, crawling around an attic's not very fun. So,
Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this? Have you tried to pull this stuff off ever?
No, I never have. Closest I've come is trying to pull off zip tape.
That's also an exercise in futility, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'm sure that wasn't helpful at all, Mike, but this comes from James from British Columbia. Dear FHB podcast crew, yesterday I spent a terrifying day finishing my own poured concrete crawl space and 2 slabs for new backyard sheds. With the 3 operators of the pump truck watching in horror, I sweated and swore my way to a D+ finished product. Feeling embarrassed about my overconfidence, I suspect there are other elements of a house build that do-it-yourselfers should consider hiring out to a pro. I have a home extension and renovation plan for next year, and I'd appreciate knowing what you all believe are the areas most prone to mistakes by enthusiastic yet inexperienced homeowners. Thanks, James. Wow, I got some opinions on this. Who wants to go first?
I'll start. I think that feeling embarrassed by your overconfidence, that's just like the theme of doing any building project for yourself.
Yeah.
And I would say if you're not feeling embarrassed by your overconfidence, you're not pushing the envelope far enough. Because I think I felt that way through the entire year-long build of my house.
What do you think was the most challenging things? And you are a professional builder, right? So it's really not a apples to apples comparison, but you certainly have some perspective on this question.
Yeah, and I took on and tried to take on things that, maybe I did once with another guy who knew how to do it really well. I had an odyssey of doing all the ceramic tile for our house. It's like on and off for maybe 3 months. My father-in-law and my wife and I were doing all hexagon tile around the house. And it got to the point where it was just like you're on the ground in tears at the thought of mixing more thin set to do more hexagon tile. So I think to me, it's really about taking that inventory of what can you do with the resources that you have. You can always go out and buy tools, but if it's the kind of job that should require 3 guys and it's just going to be you,
yeah,
you got to really think hard about it. And the other thing I did was I hired out the shingling of my roof, which was something I very easily could have done as I bought the materials. But, there was a group of guys that did it for $100 a square. So they did my whole roof for $3,000 and they did it in a day. And that would have taken me a week. So the thinking about your time saved in that regard is important to me.
There's always jobs where an extra person, so if it's just you by yourself, one extra person doesn't just make it twice as fast, it can make it 4 times faster. So
Especially
those
if they're
projects
pros
for
and
sure.
you are not, right? That's the other thing.
The other thing I would add, and I agree with everything that Ian said, the other thing, for me building this house, my goal was to do mostly the things that I'm either good at or I like to do. Because drywall taping, I'm awful at it and I don't like doing it. Painting is that's something a homeowner can do. I'm not doing it because I just don't like painting. So your project's going to be a lot more fun if you pick the things that not only are you maybe good at or have done before, but things that you will probably like doing. And the other thing I would say is don't discount a combination, like you said, Ian. For example, I have a plumber who I told him, I wanted to work with him and help him, and he agreed to work by the hour, which is fantastic because, I can drill a hole in a stud with the best of them and pull PEX through it like nobody's business. But you get to some of these things where you don't want to make a mistake in your waste lines or your water supplies. So if he says, hey, pull that hose from there over to here, how much money did I save by doing that? Yet I'm not making the ginormous mistakes I could be making by making all those.
You have some adult supervision.
Adult supervision, correct, yeah. Yes.
One of the things that I did too was just to keep schedule moving, doing stuff for people. So my concrete contractor was unavailable, so I did all the footings. And then he came out on the day that we poured and, we poured them together, and then he brought all his wall panels over. But that's another important thing to think about is when you are subbing stuff out to guys, it becomes this, okay, what can I do so the plumber can come back? And going back to our ceramic tile stuff, I did the tile on the shower valve walls before doing the rest of it so that the plumber could come back and install the shower head and controls, and just thinking creatively about that to make sure that you're not calling these guys back for 2 hours worth of work just because you need it done that day.
Right.
And knowing your limitations like this. So I've done plenty of sidewalks and slabs and even a few garage slabs, but I've never done a slab on grade in a house, which mine is. So I'm doing all of the leveling, all of the foam because I want it done right. I'm doing the vapor barrier because I want that. I'm going to seal all the pipes, and I don't know the people are going to do it. So
That's not what they're good at, right? It's not what they're trained to
No.
do. They're trained to
Nope.
pour concrete. They're not trained to detail foam.
So when they show up here, they're pouring concrete. That's it. They could show up and a truck could show up 5 minutes later. They're pouring it. And even then, I'm terrified that it's going to be, because this is my floor. I want it to be flat as possible. And I know that I'm not possible. If it's if a garage or a sidewalk or a patio is a little wavy, big deal. But you want your floor. You don't want to be tripping as you walk through the living room.
I'm going to say, concrete gives even folks who have done it dozens of times, heart palpitations before the truck comes. I've never seen people so stressed in my entire life on a construction site, right? Most things just roll off your back, but when that truck shows up, you're losing your mind.
Right.
And unlike a lot of things that can be fixed, bad concrete there's no fixing. It's redoing.
Yeah.
I can say that from my own experience, with accepting Andy's help, doing the excavation work for the barn, I did absolutely everything with Carol's help and some help from friends, with the exception of the concrete work. It's I poured the footings myself, which were, bell-shaped piers. But when it came time to pour the 24 by 30 foot slab, I got some help from people who knew what the heck they were doing, because that could go horribly wrong very quickly. And physically, it's impossible to manage. As James pointed out, he was sweating and swearing his way to completion because it's physically demanding.
Yeah. And you're on the clock. You can't just say, hey, I'm going to take a break for half an hour.
I think everything else, Ian and I talked about drywall finishing specifically before you started your house, right? And that would be something else I would tell someone to sub out, because it's the finished product. You're going to be looking at your own half-baked drywall for the time in your building, right? And those folks do it so quickly and so great. I would pay someone to do that. I did my own septic system once in our first house, and I would tell people not to do that too. It's just I saved maybe $2,000 or $3,000, and as Ian said, I spent 60, 100 hours to do that work. It didn't pay, but I did get to drive a backhoe for a week, so there is that.
That's the whole reason you did it.
Yeah.
I'm sure that all the contractors I had actually bid it and then saw me driving the backhoe around, knew that exactly that's what I was doing. Jeff, do you have any thoughts on this? Is there something that you would tell James to do, to sub out?
Yeah, well, I think you guys have hit the nail on the head, and it's, the stuff you enjoy, do that stuff.
I'm not going to say that. I say do all the stuff. Make yourself miserable. There is something satisfying about pain and suffering when you're done.
Yeah, but if you don't learn and do it again next time, that's my problem.
Yeah. One more thing to consider: if you make one mistake and it's going to cost you hundreds or thousands of dollars, you might want to not. If you're cutting a quartz countertop or something like that, where if you screw it up, it's going to be really, really expensive.
Yeah, that was my uncle's point. Is if your DIY projects cost you more than someone doing it, you've made a mistake. You've made a poor choice. What are the physical, or what are the tasks that you guys would also say not to do besides concrete work? Plumbing, I think we
Roofing.
put on the list, right?
If you're not used to crawling around on a roof, I just wouldn't.
What about on a low slope ranch?
412. If it's you can still break your neck falling off a 10-foot drop. So
yeah,
I guess it all depends. Yeah, if 412, you're probably safe, but
plumbing, roofing, concrete, drywall. You have anything to add to the list, Ian?
The one thing I would add is that I was really lucky that my dad's a nutcase too, with the being up on heights, and it doesn't bug him. So we sheathed the back of my house off of 2 38-foot ladders, I think, carrying the zip sheathing up and chucking it over the top of the ladder and nailing it off for the first run.
Yeah.
And then he walked him up the ladder by himself and handed them to me after I got up there. So you got.
If he wasn't a farmer, he would not be able to do that physically, right? I think that has everything to do with it. Yeah,
he's in his early 60s, and he can't sit still. He's got to be doing something. So he was like, "Well, we'll just carry it up the ladder. It's not that big a deal. Throw it over the top." So thinking about that, because that's not everybody. I mean, most people, even my father-in-law, who's a retired carpenter, one-man band remodeler. His whole life was like, I'm not going up on that 712. Forget that.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Mine's a
that's-
12-12, so that's out of the question.
I almost think those are better because, like, you know, you need staging, roof jacks, something. You know, there's no doubt about it. It's not like questionably walkable. You just have to have some means to get around up there.
And it's almost like siding when they get steep enough.
It's definitely less easy. I find it's easier on my back because it's less bending completely over. Mm-hmm. Well, James, I wish you great success, and God bless you for, you know, struggling through your concrete pour. That's gutsy. Do you think those concrete truck folks were talking about that all the way home?
I think they see. Don't think that's an unusual scene for those guys. And some of those guys, I've had them where we've had somebody not show up, and they'll grab a muck and rake and start helping. So most of the guys I've dealt with are pretty understanding and helpful.
I think everyone wants it to work. Everyone wants success. You know, it's just the nature of folks who build things. Like, you don't want to watch someone struggle, right? You just want them to have a successful time of it.
Yeah, they don't want to go back to the ready mix yard with a solid tank on the truck either.
I really think concrete has got to be the scariest thing. Like, you can cut out pipes and redo wiring, and you can redo siding or roofing or whatever it is, but geez, concrete is a whole different animal. Anyone have any thoughts before we go?
I wanted to ask Mark, have you shown Patrick your house plans so that he can point out all the spots you're going to have trouble with, like you did to me?
It's not going to happen.
Before I moved back here, I met Patrick and we had a beer and I showed him the plans and he was like, "This is going to give you a hard time. The roof is too complicated." So I started calling him Macomb-Stradamus because of his ability to predict where I was going to have problems.
I'll have to remember that.
Anyone who's built their own place, I think, could have looked at your plans and said the same thing, you know?
Mine is 3 rectangles. That's it. It's as easy
and
as
it's
it
low
gets.
to the ground, right? I think that has everything to do with it, making it easier.
Well, the main part's a 2-story, with 9-foot walls, so that part's a little tall, but it's not a 2-story walkout.
I think it's pretty cool you're doing that, and it's pretty cool you have a place to live while you do it. You know, Ian was in his parents' basement, which I'm sure got a little old after a while.
It got a little old really fast.
Wow. I was in an RV for my wife lived in town with her sister, and I was in an RV at the job site, and it was not good. And so this place just came out. It was just very lucky. This place came for sale right across the street.
So have you spent a winter in there yet, Mark?
Nope, I have not. So we'll see what happens.
What are you thinking about that?
I think we'll be fine. I've got 2 mini splits, one in the kind of temporary bedroom that I framed up and one in the main area. And as far as keeping it cool on a 95-degree day, it was no problem. So if we reverse that logic, hopefully it should be fine. And it's fitted for a fireplace, so. Although the guy, it's not that big of a building. He left a fireplace. It's brand new, but I think it's like 380,000 BTU fireplace. It's ginormous.
A fireplace or a wood stove?
I'm sorry, wood stove. Yeah,
okay.
Wood stove. Yeah. So
well, you might be hooking that up some evening.
It's the size of a refrigerator almost. It's huge.
Wow.
Maybe they were selling them by the cubic foot that day or something.
I mean, if you could tamper it down, good. I mean, would only have to fill it once a day, but man. Overkill. Yeah.
I think that's a mistake people make. They don't realize. They're like, "Oh, well, that's bigger. It's got to be better. I want to put big logs in there. I want it to burn for 8 hours while I'm at work or whatever." But then your house is like 100 degrees.
Yep.
Well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have for today. Thanks to Jeff, Mark, and Ian for joining me, and thanks to all of you for listening. Please remember to send us your comments, questions, and suggestions to fhbpodcast@taunton.com, and please like, comment, or review us however you're listening. It helps other folks find our podcast. Stay safe, everybody. Keep craft alive. Thanks very much for listening. Ian, thanks, man. It was great having you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Patrick.
It was fun. Bye, everybody. Thanks for listening.